React is currently at version 16.3, but back in March, Dan Abramov, one of the brightest minds working on React over at Facebook, gave a really interesting talk and showed us a glimpse of the future on some of these new upcoming React features. In this video, we'll recap Dan's talk, but if you have 30 minutes to spare and you want to watch the video in its entirety, we'll definitely leave a link in the description below. During the talk, two features were discussed and demoed, one being time slicing and the other one which is being dubbed Suspense. First, let's talk about time slicing. So by now, we all know that React's virtual DOM is one of the coolest, most performant aspects of React. Under the hood, React is comparing different snapshots of our virtual DOM to one another to find the differences, and then applying those snapshots or those differences to our DOM or whatever environment we might be working in, like React Native or something. But even with this nifty trick and performance gain, we can still experience our app slowing down as more nodes are created within our application, because React is trying really hard to figure out the differences between each snapshot, and it becomes harder to do as you create more nodes within the app. You might have already experienced this if you've ever tried to make a big chart widget or chart component and fit a lot of data set into that one component. More nodes are created within that component and that graph, and then as you put more data into it, your application becomes slower and slower, and pretty soon you can't even use the dang thing. But with time slicing, components can have a higher priority as when React will update those components over others. So for example, if we have a user typing into a text box, we might want to give this a higher priority versus the large complex chart that we created. This will allow our application to still feel super responsive even if we were on a slow network or low powered device. This is a huge problem most web developers run into no matter what framework you're working in, no matter what library you're working in. It's kind of one of the limitations of the web itself and has JavaScript interpreted. It can only handle so much of a load, so when you're pumping all this data through it, all this processing, you have to get a little fancy about how you're going to handle this so your application is still responsive and performant. Next, let's talk about the new Suspense feature. The team at Facebook has built a generic way for components to suspend rendering while they load asynchronous data. So what does that mean? Well, basically, we will soon be able to target specific parts of our React application to load in more intentional ways. Like if a comment box was taking a particularly long time to load, and we want to show a loading spinner. But rather than just throwing the loading spinner down for every single case, we can actually tell React to show this to a user if the request is taking longer than 5 seconds. If the request finishes quickly, we can bypass these loading indicators to make our application feel almost instantaneous. This should be really helpful in building our applications and will give developers new ways to specifically design for devices on slower networks and those with less powerful devices. Developers will be able to control these aspects with new components that are not yet released but are coming later this year in 2018. Both these new features, time slicing and suspense, are set to take care of a lot of prompts across CPU power and general I/O, which can be collectively referred to as async rendering with React. And the whole purpose of being to adapt to users' device and their networks better. Well, that's going to do it for this quick video on the state of React. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to get more updates on React like this in the future. We'll see you again in the next one.